Hi everybody, this is John from Old John's Vlogs again. If you like my videos, would you please subscribe and click on the like button, please. As I said in the last two videos, I'm just trying a new venture, and what I'm doing is I'm taking notes from my diaries. I wrote about 200 words a day in the diaries starting 1977, so there's quite a bit of information there. Whether you find it interesting or not, I don't know, but I will pick some bits out with different topics, and I've already covered the floor in the living room, and what else have I done? I don't know what else I've done already. Anyway, this is the third. Actually, it's the fourth one, but the third one didn't materialize. So I've mentioned that things were very tight back then financially. I've said to you all that we put everything down. We had to try and get in a house of our own. Now there was a reason why we picked this house. It was to be close to Mum, who was a poorly lady, so we wanted to be close to her so that we could help see to her. But in doing so, we had to sell our vehicle and any other goods and bits that we had to put the down payment on the mortgage, and we didn't recover for a long time. But I don't regret it. I've got a lovely family, and you'll know from later vlogs that things did turn around our way eventually. Anyway, still in 1977, things were tight. I've mentioned that before, and the only way through, I thought at that time, was to start growing our own food. Now, I couldn't get an allotment. They were like there was about a 12-month waiting list to try and get one. So a friend of mine told me about an old man who could no longer do his garden, and he said, why don't I go along and have a chat with him? And the deal was that if I dug his garden over, I could grow my own vegetables, and that's what I did. And just to give you an idea of how things were going with the prices at that time, I do apologise, I have done before, I've put Q words down as I thought. I'm making a mess of it. We got a note in the diary saying that Rington's tea, which I no longer can afford, went up over a short period of time by 25%. Now, we liked Rington's tea at that time, and they delivered it, but we could no longer afford it, so we had to think of something else. Anyway, I finished up borrowing a spade off a friend of mine, and that helped me to do the digging in the garden of this old man. I'll not go into the whys and wherefores of the situation that transpired, but what happened was that I dug his garden for him, all of it, double dug it in fact. Now, I don't know if you know about double digging. It's you get rid of all the waste in the garden. Instead of a depth, spade depth, you have 2 spade depths, and then you fill the trench in afterwards from the soil that you started off with when you piled it up at the beginning. Very hard work, but I was able then, because the soil was treated properly, and that's what I did in my own garden actually later in life. I had some good results. We got potatoes, peas, beans, carrots, onions, cabbage, I think also cauliflowers as well. Well, I went to the garden one day and the old man had decided he was going to help himself, and without saying anything. And I finished up, he was taking more than we were taking, and that really knocked the wind out of my sail, and so I kept pushing then to try and get an allotment. But I'd given it a go, I'd given it my best shot, and just didn't work out. Anyway, let's have a look at my notes. Yes, by now I was quite knowledgeable with bird watching and nature. In fact, I spent 7 years on one site called Winterset every weekend and in the evenings in summer, getting as much knowledge as I could because I just enjoyed it. Sometimes I watched the sun go down, sometimes I watched the sun rise, sometimes I was on site when the lake was frozen. But I was young, I could stand it. I had a motorbike and I put layers and layers of clothing on, and that's how I learnt my all about nature. Anyway, I got some kind of a structure going where people trusted what I had to say. I never lied about birds. Well, a man once said to me, "Can you see the golden eye?" Philip Wordsworth, actually, a local bird watcher and a man who got the bird watching group running in my area, very nice chap. And I said I could see the golden eye, and I couldn't. And that's the only time I ever told a fib, a lie, about bird watching. And so people trusted me after that. When I said no, I haven't seen it, or yes I have, and I was probably the first to see it anyway in the area, because everybody else would be doing their own thing while I was out there. So in doing so, a friend of mine came to me and asked me if I would consider doing a warden's job on working actually for the council, who were trying to set up areas for nature. When I went in, I thought, "Oh, this is just what I want." But when I went into it, if you remember from my other vlog, I was telling you that I was working 7 days a week and on standby. But the thing about the weekend work was that once we had done what we had to do, we could go home. The warden's job was going to be different. I would be erecting fences, digging ditches, and all sorts of physical stuff like that. But I would also have to work the public holidays, and I wanted to see my son growing up, and I wanted to go, well, we did a lot of walking back then because that's all we could do, but when public holidays were there, I wanted to go walking with my wife and my son. And so I turned the job down. And as it happened, I was pleased I did, because it was only short term. Yeah, I also said that the job I was doing at the time, working for the council on the main drainage unit, actually, a job that probably most people would never do, but as I've said before, at that time I had no formal education, qualification wise, and I had no real skills either, so I just took work that was available at that time. I didn't want throwing out of my house. The mortgage had to be paid, so I did everything that I could, and working for the main drainage was, for a long time, 2 years, an option. I have to say though, there was one occasion when I was working with a team of lads that I would never have thought was possible. And we went down. We were supposed to be going down a drain which was under the city, and the drain pipe was about 8 feet high. I hope you know what that is in feet and inches. I apologise if I am confusing you on that one. And what they had to do, this drain was a fast flowing drain, but if you went and did it on a Saturday afternoon, the flow was a lot less than normal. Now we all had to be kitted up, and one of the things that everybody had to wear was a necker, like a piece of cloth around the neck tied, and that was to make sure that nothing could drop down your neck. And we had to go to the doctors frequently to see that we hadn't got certain diseases you can get from sewage. I have to say it wasn't raw sewage, it was sewage that was mixed with a lot of water, and it has like a sweet smell to it, and not a noxious smell. Some people thought it was, I suppose, but you get used to it. But this highlights how willing I was to make sure that my family and I had a roof over our head. I was doing jobs that nobody else would do. But on this occasion we went down in this city drain. The roads had to be blocked off, and there was four. It was a dual carriageway going both ways, and we had to go. We were supposed to go down this major pipe work. Now you had to have training. You had to lift your feet one at a time slowly. You had to be chained together or roped together, I think it was. And the reason for lifting the feet was so you didn't disturb the methane. You had to have 2 entries and exits, and where the men were working they had to be air vents going through and coming out on both sides of where the men was working, and it was fascinating work, absolutely incredibly fascinating work. I, being the new boy at that time, wasn't allowed to go down the drain. I had to send down the papers to make sure that the methane was tested. It was tested for methane and safe for the men to go down. I had to write it all down. I had to write down who was going down the main drain and when they went down, to test how long they were because they were only allowed down there for a short period of time. Anyway, the work that they did was very successful, and the men were in and out of there within half an hour, and I should think we'd been finished in about 4 hours, because you had to clean up and everything and make it safe for the public. And we did a lot of stuff like that, and of course we could only do it at the weekends, and so we got extra payment for that. Dangerous work though, if you're not trained, and not to be taken lightly. Now anybody that was involved with that type of work will tell you that you have to rely on one another when you're down there, like in the pit in fact, but not as dangerous as the pit. The pit was very dangerous. I worked in the pit for a short time, and I'll tell you about that at some point. I mentioned that we used to go walking a lot and that we've enjoyed nature, and there was a stream close by which had never dried up in living memory. In fact, my wife as a child went there, and unfortunately she cut her leg someone had thrown a jam jar in there, cut her foot on it, and she was rushed to the nearest doctor's, not hospital at that time, and he stitched her up. And it's always been a weakness, that ankle. But anyway, on this occasion when we got there, it was completely dry, a first of its time, as I said, in living memory. We walked everywhere, and it wasn't the fashion then, by the way. The fashion then, back in the 70s, was to ride everywhere in cars. But we hadn't got a car. We had sold our vehicle, as I said to you, to get a mortgage down payment, and it was to be many years actually that we were when we were able to get a vehicle. I think I was about 45 years of age when we got our first vehicle, and it was only just roadworthy. It was a banger, as they say, or banger, and it was not. It should have been on the road. I don't know how it passed its MOT, but we were able to trade that car. And I'd seen there was a deal going off, and it said at that time, buy a vehicle, blah blah blah, and we will trade your old vehicle, no matter what the condition it was in, for £1,000. And that's what I did, and that's how we got started with our first decent vehicle, which was a Ford, and it was a company called Daewoo, and they were fantastic. They couldn't do enough for us. Any little thing that was wrong with the vehicle they put right, because it was on a guarantee. I think it was guaranteed for either 1 or 3 years, and it was one of the best services I've ever come across with vehicles. I've dealt with Ford, and Ford were wonderful at first. They were local too, and then they moved to the nearest city, and I don't know what happened there, but they became absolute bent on bad service for a time. So I packed in with those, and we eventually were able to get a much better car, and then we went for a new Citroen, which they were doing deals on at the moment, at that time I mean, and we've been with Citroen ever since. There's much better cars out there, but for what we want, because we still walk if we can, we do a very low mileage, and you know, for us to buy a state-of-the-art vehicle would be nonsense really, because we couldn't do it justice, and the value of that vehicle would be gone in no time at all. Having said that, I am pondering now what to do about electric cars. I'm getting on in age. I can't see me driving. Maybe 5 years from now I probably have to pack in, but the one thing that is very good with me is I've got very good reactions, and I have a little test. You can see the wardrobe behind me. I put something on the wardrobe top, on top of a towel. I pull the towel and catch whatever it is that's coming off the top of the wardrobe, and I think if I can't catch it, that my reactions are too slow, and that'll be the time when it is time not to drive again. Unfortunately, I live in a village where we are dependent on cars, because the bus service is irregular, and I would say we are isolated. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but if this is what you like to hear, please let me know. And I'm not rude. I don't swear. The facts that I give you are true, and a lot of it will probably be information that young people have never heard of before. I could tell you about when I was a little boy. We lived in a terraced house just after the war that had gas lights inside. We were lucky to have a radio that worked off valves. So to come from that to black and white television, coloured television, all sorts of stations that we could never get before. When we first got our TV, a black and white picture, it was BBC One, and I think it became BBC One and Two later, and then ITV. And ITV had to be received on a little black box on top of the television, much like today's Roku, in fact, but larger. And so we've seen a lot of change, and I hope that we can carry on seeing change for the better. Anyway, I'll finish there. So if you've enjoyed this chat of mine, boring, I hope not, please let me know and I'll do some more. Bye.